Today we're diving headfirst into a moment that has the entire WWE Universe buzzing with shock and excitement. It wasn't a match. It wasn't a promo. It wasn't even on the script. It was a moment. And in WWE, moments like this are nuclear. June 16, 2025. Monday Night Raw. Resch Center, Green Bay, Wisconsin. By all accounts, it was a solid night of wrestling. Gunther had just beaten Jey Uso in a hard-hitting opener. Sami Zayn was spotted backstage talking strategy with Kevin Owens. The women's division teased a new #1 contender storyline. The crowd was rowdy. The energy was high. No one expected anything more than a well-paced show heading into July's Saturday night's main event. And then, without warning, without hype, without a single ounce of foreshadowing, the lights went black. The opening riff of Goldberg's theme hit the speakers like a thunderclap. For a second, even the commentators couldn't find words. The arena wasn't ready. The world wasn't ready. And that's exactly how Goldberg wanted it. He walked out slowly, no fireworks, no pyro, no smoke. Just boots, gloves, and that unmistakable scowl. Like he'd just walked out of 1998 and straight into Gunther's world. The fans? They exploded. The Goldberg chant started almost before the theme music even hit the second bar. The man who defined dominance in an era long gone was back. That was it. No monologue. No war of words. No storytelling package. Just a 4-line kill shot delivered with absolute menace. "This is your moment," Goldberg growled. "But remember Atlanta, Gunther? You started something there. I'm finishing it, July 12th, Saturday night's main event. You're next." Gunther didn't say a word. Didn't need to. His silence, and visible unease, spoke louder than any retort ever could. But even that wasn't the true main event of the night. No, the most important moment didn't happen under the lights or in front of the crowd. It happened in the shadows. Backstage. Off camera, or at least, supposedly off camera. That's where Roman Reigns was waiting. WWE cut to a backstage segment shortly after Goldberg's return. There stood Roman Reigns, arms crossed, back to the camera, his expression unreadable. No Paul Heyman. No Solo. Just the tribal chief alone, lurking in the hallway like a lion waiting for a challenger. And into that hallway walked Goldberg. No music. No words. Just footsteps. 2 icons. 1 hallway. 0 scripts. They didn't fight. They didn't even raise their voices. But that segment hit harder than any steel chair shot. The history between these two? Thick with unfinished business. Their face-off at Elimination Chamber 2022 was meant to be a WrestleMania main event years earlier, until Roman pulled out. The match finally happened, but the build-up had gone stale. Many fans wrote it off. But in that moment on Raw, all of it came flooding back. The history. The tension. The blood left on the mat. The unfinished chapter that just got ripped wide open again. And if you looked closely, if you really watched Reigns' face, you saw something you rarely see from the tribal chief: concern. Not fear. Not insecurity. But the realization that something big had just shifted in the locker room hierarchy. And not in his favor. We'll get to the backstage confrontation. We'll dissect every quote, every breath, every micro-expression. But first, understand this. Paul Heyman panicked. The moment Roman and Goldberg locked eyes, Heyman's entire demeanor shifted. Eyewitnesses backstage said Heyman left gorilla position mid-segment. Others claim he was seen whispering urgently into his phone just minutes later. A few say he tried to intercept Goldberg before he got to Roman, and failed. Because this wasn't about Goldberg stealing the spotlight. This wasn't about Gunther's world title being in danger. This was about the bigger picture, about control. Heyman has always operated from the shadows, crafting Roman Reigns' rise like a chessboard. Every feud, every opponent, every power play, carefully curated. Nothing left to chance. Goldberg? Goldberg is chance. Goldberg is chaos. And for a man like Heyman, chaos is the enemy. Let's be clear, Goldberg didn't return for Roman Reigns. At least, not publicly. He challenged Gunther for the World Heavyweight Championship, plain and simple. He planted that flag clearly, directly, and without apology. But the story doesn't end there. Not when Roman Reigns, still very much the heart of WWE's Bloodline era, makes it a point to confront the man who nearly ended his legacy. Not when Heyman starts acting like a general watching enemy forces land on his shores. And not when fans across social media are already theorizing a triple threat, a Bloodline betrayal, or a Goldberg-Reigns rematch on Roman's terms. Because that's what this is about now. Control. Legacy. Power. Gunther might hold the title. But Roman Reigns still holds the throne. And Goldberg? He just kicked the door off the hinges. Over the next several chapters, we're breaking it all down, the precise moment this return turned into a reckoning. Why Gunther's dominance was always going to summon a ghost. The full history between Goldberg and Reigns, including the match we never got. Why Paul Heyman sees Goldberg as more dangerous than anyone Roman's ever faced. And whether this is Goldberg's last dance, or Roman's next war. We'll look at the facts, the footage, the history, and the psychology. Every segment. Every feud. Every wrinkle in the tribal war story. This isn't just a wrestling story. It's a power struggle disguised as a homecoming. And the ending? That's still being written, in whispers, stare-downs, and sharpened spears. So strap in. Because when legends return, titles are on the line, and egos collide behind closed doors? That's when wrestling stops being scripted, and starts feeling real. The Resch Center in Green Bay wasn't built to contain what was coming. The crowd didn't know it. The production crew didn't know it. Even the superstars walking the halls backstage didn't fully grasp it. But Monday Night Raw on June 16 wasn't going to be just another weekly episode. It would become a turning point. Not through pyro, not through match finishes, but through a sequence of moments that would ripple through every storyline, every locker room alliance, and every championship hierarchy in WWE. The episode started like any other post-PLE Raw. The commentary team was in rhythm. The graphics were slick. The storylines from last week were lined up for continuation. The opening match card had been locked in. Gunther, newly crowned World Heavyweight Champion, defending his reputation in a singles match against Jey Uso. It wasn't for the title, but it was high stakes, personal, and exactly the kind of bout you'd expect to open the show with a bang. By 7:58 p.m. local time, fans were already filling the air with tribal chants. Split reactions were the new norm in WWE. Some cheered Roman Reigns and the Bloodline. Others backed Jey Uso, Sami Zayn, Cody Rhodes, or any other name that opposed the Empire. But on this particular night, the tone was different. There was no single chant. There was electricity in the building that couldn't be attributed to any one rivalry or name. Fans were leaning forward in their seats. Something felt off. Something felt raw. Unpredictable. Gunther made his entrance just before the top of the hour. He was stoic. No smile. No smirk. No wasted movement. He walked to the ring like a general marching to battle. His entrance, defined by classical music and cold intensity, wasn't flashy. It was calculated. Dominant. That's what made it unsettling. The man known as the Ring General wasn't here for applause. He was here to maintain control. Jey Uso came out next, and the crowd roared. Still riding the momentum of his solo run, Jey represented resistance. Not just to Gunther, but to everything that had dominated WWE over the last 2 years. His entrance was loud, defiant, and full of swagger. The crowd fed off his energy. There was movement in the upper decks. Signs waving. Phones raised. Fans knew they were getting a match with implications that went beyond the final bell. The match that followed was brutal. Technical on Gunther's end. Explosive on Jey's. There were no wasted sequences. Every chop echoed. Every superkick landed with purpose. The commentary team was dialed in, selling Gunther's unshakable power and Jey's never-die spirit. By the 15-minute mark, both men were bruised and heaving. Gunther hit a brutal powerbomb into a stack pin. 1, 2, 3. Clean victory. No interference. No controversy. And yet, that match is now a footnote. Because what happened after, what unfolded in the minutes that followed, is what flipped the entire show inside out. Gunther took the mic. Not something he often does, but when he speaks, people listen. He stood in the center of the ring, sweating, breathing hard, and made a statement that instantly lit the powder keg. Jey Uso was the better man, he said. But that was only for one night. He paused. The crowd jeered. Then came the line that changed everything. Every other night, I am untouchable. There was confidence in his tone. Not arrogance. Gunther wasn't showboating. He was asserting dominance in the way only champions can, through quiet certainty. The kind that says, you can cheer for legends. You can chant for nostalgia. But this is my era. Then the chant started. Soft at first, barely audible on the broadcast. Goldberg. Goldberg, Gunther kept speaking, trying to power through. I don't care about the past. I've beaten everyone worth mentioning in the present. There is no legend, but the chant grew louder. Fans weren't asking politely. They were demanding it. Goldberg. 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 That's when Gunther's demeanor changed. Not his expression, but his stance. His left hand tightened around the mic. His jaw shifted slightly. His words came quicker, edgier. I'm done with him. Goldberg's a ghost. A relic. I'd break him in half and send him back to the history books. He tossed the mic. Those were the last words anyone heard before the lights went out. Total blackout. Music silenced. Camera cut to wide shot. The crowd shrieked. You could feel the shift through the screen. Then the sound hit. That sound. The haunting, rumbling guitar riff that once signaled impending doom in WCW arenas. It wasn't remixed. It wasn't reimagined. It was the original. And that alone was enough. The Resch Center lost it. Grown men screamed. Kids jumped. Security looked around, unsure of what to expect. WWE had managed to keep the return completely under wraps. Goldberg stepped into the smoke. He didn't rush. He didn't grin. He didn't even blink. He stared straight at the ring, fists clenched. This wasn't the version of Goldberg that joked with fans or high-fived kids. This was the old-school, run-through-a-brick-wall version. The same one that wrecked 173 straight opponents without remorse. The version that held WCW together in its final years by sheer force of presence. And Gunther felt it. He never left the ring. He stood tall, but the stiffness in his posture said everything. Goldberg was in his head. When Goldberg entered the ring, the camera zoomed tight. You could see the sweat on Gunther's brow. You could hear fans in the front row yelling, "Finish him." And then Goldberg spoke. Just one promo. Short. Sharp. Enough to ignite a war. "This is your moment," he said. "But remember Atlanta, Gunther? You started something there. I'm finishing it, July 12th, Saturday night's main event. You're next." Then he dropped the mic clean. Symbolic. The crowd roared louder than they had all night. Gunther didn't respond. He simply stared, eyes darting. conflicted between stepping forward or stepping back. Goldberg left the ring without another word. At that point, everyone expected the camera to cut. Maybe to commercial. Maybe to a backstage angle. But that wasn't the end. Backstage, a new scene began. One that would reframe everything that had just happened. The screen flickered to life again, and there was Roman Reigns. Standing alone. Watching a monitor. Silent. That's when it became clear, this wasn't just about Goldberg versus Gunther. This was about territory. And Roman Reigns had just watched another alpha enter the jungle. There was no music. No voiceover. Just quiet tension as the camera panned from Roman's face to the hallway behind him. Footsteps. And then, from the shadows, Goldberg reappeared. Roman didn't flinch. Goldberg didn't stop walking until he was shoulder to shoulder with the tribal chief. There were no fans now. No commentary. Just two heavyweights in a silent hallway filled with history. Goldberg. Didn't expect to see you here, Roman said calmly. Goldberg didn't blink. Didn't expect to be here. But some things need settling. No one said the word Jeddah. No one had to. The memory was loud enough. This was a meeting of forces. Not for a match. Not for a promo. For positioning. For psychological warfare. The camera lingered on Roman's face as Goldberg walked away. There was no smile. No frown. Just a look of calculation. It was a storm forming. And the skies over Green Bay were getting dark. This wasn't an angle. It was the first domino. And Paul Heyman? He wasn't even in the frame. Because he was already moving. Already calling. Already preparing for something he never thought he'd have to plan for again. A war between icons. A collision of eras. And maybe, a dethroning of legacies. Who is Gunther right now? If you're watching WWE in 2025 and still thinking of Gunther as just the former Intercontinental Champion, you've already missed the point. Gunther isn't just a champion anymore. He's an institution. A system. A rulebook wrapped in muscle and precision. And at the time Goldberg returned, Gunther wasn't defending a title, he was defending an era. His era. To understand what Goldberg walked into, you first have to understand what Gunther built. It started quietly. No pyro. No hype machine. Just cold precision and a slow-burning legacy. When Gunther first arrived in WWE, he wasn't chasing headlines. He was redefining brutality. Clean boots. No wasted movement. Matches that felt like military drills. He didn't work the crowd, he dismantled them. The Intercontinental title was never meant to be his ceiling. That belt became his platform. From early 2022 to late 2024, Gunther tore through the mid-card like a storm on rails. Sheamus. Ricochet. Drew McIntyre. Nakamura. Even Braun Strowman. One by one, they lined up and got dropped. Not with flashy finishers or gimmicked angles, with chops that broke chests and powerbombs that emptied lungs. But more important than who he beat was how he beat them. Gunther didn't just win, he neutralized. Every time he walked out of the ring, his opponent looked like they had survived a war. Win or lose, they left altered. Smaller. Quieter. When the IC title run finally ended, it wasn't because Gunther slipped. It was because he let go of the belt to reach for a bigger throne. By mid-2024, he declared war on the main event scene. No sneak attacks. No backstage politics. Just one message to the locker room, I'm next. It took him less than 6 months to climb the ladder. Title matches came. Seth Rollins. Damian Priest. Cody Rhodes. All world-class. All precise in their own ways. But none of them had Gunther's endurance or his resolve. His ability to dictate a match's tempo was unmatched. When Gunther wanted a match to slow down, it slowed. When he wanted chaos, he brought chaos. He wasn't just wrestling, he was controlling time. By early 2025, the World Heavyweight Championship was around his waist. But even that felt like a formality. What mattered more was what came after: silence. No wild celebrations. No fireworks. Gunther stood in the ring after his win over Priest at Clash of Champions and simply held the title to his chest. His eyes scanned the crowd, then the hard cam. No words. No catchphrase. That silence was his warning shot. In his reign as World Heavyweight Champion, Gunther redefined dominance all over again. He turned title defenses into executions. He didn't need help from factions or interference from heel tactics. His dominance came from discipline, and that's what made it so dangerous. He was hard to hate. Even harder to beat. Commentators described him with words like regal, unyielding, ruthless. But fans had a better word for him. Inevitable. And then, despite all that momentum, he said Goldberg's name on live television. Not directly. But dismissively. Casually. Like Goldberg was just a file in a cabinet somewhere, long closed, never to be opened again. Goldberg's a ghost. A relic. Gunther said it with absolute belief. Not malice. Not mockery. Just clinical detachment. But here's the thing about ghosts: they don't like being ignored. And Goldberg? He didn't just hear that quote. He felt it in his bones. He saw it as a challenge, not just to his name, but to the entire era he helped build. Gunther had cracked open a vault without realizing what was inside. But it's important to know, he wasn't wrong in his eyes. Gunther's logic was simple. His style doesn't depend on hype. He doesn't need nostalgia to sell pay-per-views. He doesn't rely on crowd chants or long promos. His goal is the opposite of Goldberg's rise. Goldberg was built on dominance, yes, but also spectacle. Explosions. Short matches. Massive pops. Gunther? He drains the spectacle out of his opponents. He outlasts them. Overwhelms them. He takes everything they are and breaks it apart over 25 minutes. Which makes the Goldberg matchup, on paper, completely absurd. A sprint versus a marathon. A wrecking ball versus a tactician. A legacy versus a system. But Gunther wasn't concerned. That's the part people misunderstood. He wasn't intimidated. He was insulted. To him, Goldberg's return wasn't a threat. It was an inconvenience. What Gunther didn't understand, what his system couldn't compute, was that some forces in WWE operate outside the system entirely. You can't outlast a wildfire. You can't outstrategize lightning. And you sure as hell can't gameplan for a man like Goldberg. Because Goldberg doesn't come back to wrestle. He comes back to take heads. In his mind, Gunther had disrespected everything he built. The grind. The streak. The legacy. And he wasn't looking for a debate. He was looking for a body. And Gunther? He was looking to prove a point. To show the world that legends don't haunt the modern ring. They get buried under it. But deep down, in a place even Gunther may not fully acknowledge, there was something else. Something buried beneath the calm exterior and the military precision. A flicker of recognition. Gunther knew this wasn't just another match. Not just another title defense. This was a test. Not of skill. But of myth. If he beat Goldberg, he wouldn't just add a name to his resume. He would declare an end to nostalgia as currency. He would be the one who finally drove the final nail into the Attitude Era coffin. But if he lost, even for a moment, he would become a footnote in a highlight reel that Goldberg had already started building long before Gunther debuted. And that, more than anything, is what made June 16 so volatile. Gunther had dominated everything in front of him. But for the first time since he stepped into WWE, he was being forced to face what came before him. Not in theory. Not in history packages. In flesh. In real time. The myth had become reality again. And Gunther, the system, was now under siege from a one-man revolution. The era of discipline had met the face of destruction. And neither man was backing down. The moment didn't feel big when it started. That's what made it dangerous. It wasn't announced in advance. It wasn't hyped by the commentary team. No dramatic music cued it in, it was quiet, simple. Gunther stood in the ring after his hard-fought match with Jey Uso and grabbed a microphone. There was no belt hoist. No posturing. No lap around the ring. He didn't wait for the crowd to settle. He didn't pause for dramatic effect. He just lifted the mic and started talking. That's when the fuse was lit. Gunther had just survived a banger of a match. Jey Uso brought his A-game, fast strikes, big counters, aggressive pacing. But Gunther had weathered it all. His counters were crisp. His offense was calculated. He made Jey look like a worthy opponent without ever giving up control. The crowd was hot. And Gunther stood over the result. But instead of walking off, he stayed. He stood in the center of the ring, mic in hand, sweat still running down his face, and gave the fans what he called a reality check. Jey Uso, he said, voice still calm, but layered with weariness from the match, was the better man tonight. That line got a mixed reaction. Some applause. Some Uso chants. But nobody expected what came next. That was only for one night, he added. Every other night. I am untouchable. Boom. Shift. The cheers died. Boos crept in. A few fans applauded, mostly out of respect for his performance. But most didn't like where this was going. Gunther stared into the hard cam. He didn't blink. He didn't smile. Just delivered the next line like a sniper pulling a trigger. You people live for nostalgia. You chant the names of ghosts. Pause. Let it breathe. You want fireworks. You want a streak. You want a gladiator from 20 years ago. I'm not here for your bedtime stories. The heat came instantly. The boos were louder. Not full rejection, this wasn't go-away heat, this was real heat. The kind that says, we hear you. And we don't like where you're going. But Gunther wasn't pandering. He wasn't trying to rile the crowd. He was simply speaking, without theatrics. I didn't come here to be a character. I came here to be a champion. And if that offends your memories? Good. He dropped the mic slightly, just for a breath. Because I'm not a relic. I'm not a comeback story. I'm not your childhood. I'm what comes after. The arena's tension was building. Then it happened, organically, as if someone in the upper bowl sparked a match that turned into a firestorm. The chant. Soft at first. Scattered. But clear. Goldberg. Goldberg, Gunther looked up for the first time. A flicker of reaction passed across his face. Slight tilt of the head. No smirk. No grimace. Just acknowledgement. That's when the chant grew louder. Goldberg. 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 Gunther raised the mic again, cutting through the noise. You chant for him like he's still here, he said, now pacing slightly. Like he matters. The heat hit hard. He doesn't. Boom. A line that detonated in the building. A line fans would post, replay, quote, and dissect for days. He's not coming back. And if he did, I'd break him in half. I'd send him back to the history books where he belongs. There it was. The final strike. The dismissive sentence that transformed the segment from a post-match promo into a call to war. And Gunther knew it. That's why he didn't say another word. He dropped the mic. Let it thud on the canvas. Turned. And then the lights went out. In that instant, that split-second blackout, the promo became a prophecy. Gunther had summoned something he didn't believe existed. Goldberg. But let's stop here for a second, because that moment, that promo, deserves more than a surface-level reaction. It wasn't just about what Gunther said. It was about what it meant. Gunther's entire WWE career had been built on the rejection of spectacle. He didn't cut long-winded promos. He didn't use catchphrases. He didn't break the fourth wall or reference dirt sheets. He was precision. Method. Discipline. His matches felt like blueprints, not roller coasters. And his attitude toward legends? Clinical. Dismissive. Not out of disrespect, out of design. So for him, bringing up Goldberg wasn't about starting a feud. It was about setting a boundary. He wasn't trying to provoke the man. He was trying to erase him. Erase the need for nostalgia. Erase the worship of past eras. Erase the crowd's obsession with old gods. That's what made the promo so effective. Gunther believed every word. He didn't flinch when the chants started. He didn't pivot when the boos intensified. He simply spoke what he believed to be the truth, and that's why it hit harder than any insult or diss. But that's also why it backfired. Because there's one thing you never do in WWE. You don't speak a legend's name like that, especially not Goldberg's, unless you're ready for smoke. Because Goldberg doesn't need a build. He doesn't need a storyline. He is the storyline. And when Gunther dropped that mic, the fans knew, before the music hit, before the lights changed, before the arena exploded, they knew. Goldberg was coming. Even Gunther knew, deep down. As the arena lights blinked out and the crowd roared, you could see it in his body. The sudden stillness. The quiet shift in posture. The split-second freeze in a man who doesn't freeze. He had just made a statement to the world. But now, the world was about to answer. And its name was Goldberg. The blackout wasn't planned, not in the storyline sense. This wasn't a lights dip to signal another segment or a cinematic pre-tape. It was total. Sudden. Absolute. 3 seconds of complete darkness. And then the sound hit. The bass-heavy, bone-rattling guitar riff that hasn't aged a day since the late 90s. No remix. No update. Just that raw, thunderous growl that once made Monday nights mandatory. The arena didn't react. It erupted. There's a difference. This wasn't excitement. This was impact. Noise with weight. Noise that vibrated in the chest, through the floor, up into the bones. Goldberg was back. Not rumored. Not teased. Not hinted at in a cryptic graphic weeks in advance. No QR code trail. No slow burn who's behind the vignettes game. This was old school. Pure. A missile strike. He walked out like he had somewhere to be and someone to end. Trunks. Gloves. Knees slightly bent. Chest heaving. Focus absolute. No pyro. No sparks. Just man and myth in motion. For a split second, Gunther stood frozen in the ring. The crowd, however, was already in motion, fans rising, phones held high, hands slamming barricades. You could spot front row fans literally jumping in place. The chant started mid-music, natural, almost instinctual. Goldberg. Goldberg. He didn't acknowledge it. Didn't smirk or nod or even glance around. He kept walking. Eyes locked on the ring. On Gunther. Not the belt. Not the crowd. Just the man who spoke his name like it meant nothing. Gunther shifted, not a lot, just a subtle readjustment of his stance, like someone subconsciously preparing for an incoming hit. It was the first time in months fans saw a crack in the ring general's posture. Goldberg reached the ring steps. He stopped. Paused. Looked up. There was no fear in his eyes. No fatigue. Just a quiet fury. The kind of fury that doesn't yell, it decides. He stepped through the ropes. Gunther didn't move. They stood face to face in the center of the ring, less than a foot apart. Neither man blinked. This was no stare down for the cameras. This was something else. This was two ideologies colliding. Gunther, the tactician, the unshakable pillar of modern discipline. Goldberg, the berserker of the past. No words had yet been spoken, but every fan watching knew what this meant. Then Goldberg reached for the mic. He didn't play to the crowd. Didn't pace around or wait for the pop to settle. He spoke like a man who had waited long enough. "This is your moment," he said. His voice was lower than usual. Measured. Controlled. But you could hear the strain. The bite. "But remember Atlanta, Gunther? You started something there." Pause. "I'm finishing it, July 12th. Saturday night's main event. Final breath. You're next." He dropped the mic. But not like a promo mic drop. Not a showboat gesture. He let it fall. Let the statement ring out louder than any soundbite. The crowd? Thunder. Gunther? Still silent. Still processing. And here's the part no one can fake, the shift in energy inside that ring. For all of Gunther's strength, for all of his poise, something changed the moment Goldberg said Atlanta. Because that word, that city, is not just where Goldberg came from, it's where he was forged. WCW. The Streak. The Georgia Dome. The birthplace of the myth. And now, Gunther had to walk into that city, into that history, and stand across the ring from the man who built it. This wasn't just a match challenge. This was a territorial claim. Gunther didn't respond. Not because he was afraid. But because silence was all he had left. He had opened the door. And now the past was walking through it, with boots on and fists ready. Goldberg left the ring the same way he entered, fast, focused, no eye contact with the fans. He was here for one thing. Not nostalgia. Not applause. Resolution. Backstage cameras didn't follow him right away. Commentary barely kept up. The commentary team tried to pivot the moment, frame it as a massive return, but they couldn't stop the undercurrent of tension in their voices. They felt it too. This wasn't a comeback. This was a reckoning. And the fallout was instant. Social media exploded. Clips of the entrance were uploaded within seconds. Fans at home filmed their TVs, fans in the building filmed each other. Chants continued long after Goldberg left the ring. Some people asked why. Why now? Why come back for Gunther? Why not chase the undisputed championship again? Why not finish what started with Roman? But that question had already been answered 1 year earlier. In 2024, during a backstage WWE 24 segment, Gunther had offhandedly mentioned Goldberg. It was subtle. Part of a longer quote about legends. He was asked about dream matches, and his response was sharp. Goldberg was the kind of star that worked for a certain audience at a certain time. But this is a different era. That kind of dominance doesn't mean the same thing anymore. It's empty calories. Goldberg never responded. Until now. And that's what made his return so impactful. This wasn't about a pop. This was personal. This was about being dismissed. Labeled. Forgotten. Goldberg didn't return to shake hands. He returned to remind everyone that history doesn't fade quietly, it fights back. As for Gunther, his reaction post-segment said more than any promo could. He left the ring without speaking. Walked up the ramp without looking back. And as he passed through the curtain, the cameras briefly caught his face. No panic. But deep thought. The kind of thought you only have when you realize that the test ahead might be harder than any you've passed so far. And backstage? Waiting behind the curtain, just out of the frame? Roman Reigns. Watching. Calculating. Goldberg had returned. But the storm was still building. There's a reason Goldberg didn't challenge Gunther for a match in Los Angeles, Chicago, or even at WrestleMania. There's a reason he didn't appear via satellite, post a cryptic video, or wait for SummerSlam. He chose to come back on Raw and issue the challenge in person. And he chose Atlanta for the fight. Not just for the optics. Not just for the storyline. For the message. Atlanta is more than just Goldberg's hometown. It's the crucible where his identity was forged. It's the city that made him a legend and the crowd that first chanted his name like it was war music. Atlanta isn't a location for Goldberg. It's a symbol. It's home field. And for Gunther, it's a battlefield built on another man's legacy. To understand why Atlanta matters, you have to rewind to the beginning. Before the streak. Before the belts. Before the chants. Back to 1997. That year, WCW was riding high. The NWO was printing money. Monday Nitro was consistently beating Raw in the ratings. Wrestling was hot, but WCW needed something fresh. A new monster. A force unlike anything else on the roster. And that's when a former NFL defensive tackle named Bill Goldberg walked through the curtain. He wasn't flashy. He didn't cut 10-minute promos. He didn't wear tassels, or robes, or sunglasses indoors. He wore black trunks, boots, gloves. He snorted smoke and walked to the ring like every match was life or death. And it worked. By his fourth match, crowds were chanting his name before his music even hit. By his 10th, he was already a highlight machine. And by the time WCW hit the Georgia Dome in Atlanta on July 6, 1998, Goldberg wasn't just over, he was undeniable. That night, in front of over 40,000 people in his hometown, Goldberg beat Hollywood Hogan for the WCW World Heavyweight Championship. Clean. No shenanigans. Spear. Jackhammer. 3 count. The pop was deafening. Fans rushed the barricades. Grown adults cried in the aisles. It was one of the last truly pure moments of WCW. And it all happened in Atlanta. That moment wasn't just a title win. It was a coronation. The moment where Goldberg stopped being a rising star and became a phenomenon. A symbol of raw power and unshakable momentum. The streak, the mystique, the myth, it all clicked into place that night. Since then, Atlanta has been Goldberg's domain. He's returned there multiple times. Sometimes for interviews. Sometimes for surprise appearances. But he never fought another high-stakes match there. Not on this scale. Not with this kind of weight. That's why July 12, 2025, isn't just a booking decision. It's a homecoming. But it's more than that, it's strategic. Because this match isn't happening on neutral ground. It's happening in enemy territory for Gunther. In a city that will remember every jackhammer, every spear, every flash of intensity from the old days. Atlanta won't just cheer Goldberg. It will breathe him. And Gunther knows that. That's what makes it dangerous. Gunther thrives on control. On silence. On cold, analytical matches where every move is methodical and calculated. He wins by dictating the pace, by slowly wearing down his opponent, by removing the crowd from the equation. Atlanta won't be removed. Atlanta will be the 12th man. And that kind of chaos is exactly what Gunther has avoided his entire run. Goldberg thrives in chaos. This is the man who steamrolled Brock Lesnar in under 90 seconds at Survivor Series 2016. Who burst into matches without warning, took out entire factions, and left the ring before the pyro could reset. His legacy is built on disrupting the norm. So when he said Atlanta on Raw, it wasn't a nostalgic name drop. It was a declaration. He was pulling Gunther into his world. For years, Gunther has made opponents come to him. Fight on his terms. Wrestle his matches. Follow his rules. Goldberg flipped the script. He said, "We fight where I began. In the place that gave me power. In front of a crowd that doesn't know how to sit down when my music hits. And here's the kicker, it's a psychological trap. Because if Gunther wins in Atlanta, he becomes the man who ended the myth where it was born. The man who shut down a legacy inside its own temple. But if he loses? He becomes the man who got swallowed by history. That's the trap. Goldberg doesn't need to win a 5-star match. He doesn't need to wrestle for 25 minutes or reverse 15 holds. He needs one moment. One spear. One jackhammer. One crowd reaction so loud it shakes the roof off the arena. He needs Atlanta. And that's why this challenge matters. Goldberg doesn't come back for free TV spots. He doesn't lace up for just any match. He comes back when something needs to be settled. When someone crosses a line. When someone forgets. Gunther forgot. He forgot that legends don't retire, they wait. He forgot that power doesn't always wear gold. Sometimes it wears scars. He forgot that ghosts only stay buried until you say their name. And now, Goldberg has given him a date. A place. A promise. July 12th. Saturday night's main event. Atlanta, Georgia. Not just a match. Not just a fight. A statement. The past has returned. And it's coming home. Before the lights went out on Raw. Before Goldberg's music hit. Before Gunther ever touched a microphone and dared to speak the name of a legend like it was dust, there was already history. Not a rivalry. Not a feud. But tension. A cold war. Unspoken. Unresolved. Hidden beneath the surface of years of backstage whispers, fan speculation, and philosophical differences between two men who never shared a ring, until now. To understand why Goldberg chose Gunther, and why Gunther underestimated Goldberg, you have to go back to a moment that was easy to miss if you weren't paying attention, Survivor Series 2022. That night was defined by chaos. The Bloodline was in full control of WWE. Sami Zayn was still on the inside. Roman Reigns stood tall. Gunther was still Intercontinental Champion, destroying anyone who stepped up. Goldberg had been off TV for months. No angle. No tease. Just silence. But then came the hallway. Backstage. No script. No music. Just a chance encounter that wasn't hyped or even acknowledged by the commentary team. Gunther, post-match, walking through the tunnel with Ludwig Kaiser and Giovanni Vinci at his side, passed by a closed-door locker room. The camera panned, just for a second. Just enough to catch a glance of the nameplate, Goldberg. Gunther didn't stop. But he looked. And for the first time in months, fans started speculating. Was that foreshadowing? The answer came, quietly, a week later, in an interview with a European podcast. Gunther was asked about dream matches. He listed a few names. And then came the question, do you see any appeal in facing someone like Goldberg? Gunther didn't hesitate. Not really, he said. With all due respect, I'm not in this industry to play the greatest hits. I respect what he did for WCW. But this is a different generation. That kind of dominance doesn't hold up anymore. It's not sustainable. It's not real. There it was. The trigger pulled. Not loudly. Not with insult or venom. But with quiet dismissal. To Gunther, Goldberg wasn't an opponent, he was a museum piece. Interesting. Iconic. But outdated. Goldberg didn't respond publicly. But that was the moment this match was born. Because if you know anything about Goldberg, you know he doesn't forget disrespect. And he especially doesn't forget when it's disguised as respectful critique. From that moment, fans began drawing comparisons. Not just in style, but in story. Goldberg was built on brevity, destruction, shock. Gunther was built on endurance, method, mastery. Goldberg tore through his opponents like a natural disaster. Gunther dissected his like a surgeon. They were polar opposites, which made them the perfect matchup. But WWE didn't pull the trigger. Not yet. Because there was no heat. No storyline. Only tension. And that tension grew. Every time Gunther won another title defense, the chants would start. Quiet at first. Then louder. Goldberg. Every time Gunther stood in the ring post-match, stoic and dominant, fans wondered, what if? What if the man who destroyed Hulk Hogan in front of 40,000 fans in Atlanta stepped into the ring with the man who broke Sheamus, McIntyre, and Nakamura without breaking a sweat? What if Goldberg came back not for one more pop, but for one more statement? That question loomed for over 2 years. Then came 2024. Gunther, now clearly on the rise to the World Heavyweight Championship, was no longer a mid-card wrecking machine. He was becoming the new face of discipline-based dominance in WWE. Fans started calling him the anti-Goldberg. Not as an insult, as a contrast. Goldberg returned briefly in April of that year, to induct a Hall of Fame inductee. He spoke graciously. No shots fired. No angles launched. But when asked backstage by a reporter who he thought the most dominant current WWE star was, Goldberg gave a short list: Reigns, Lashley, Rollins. Gunther wasn't on it. When asked why not, Goldberg gave a very Goldberg answer: I'm not a stat guy. I go by impact. Another spark. And just like that, the Cold War kept simmering. Gunther continued his rise. Won the World Heavyweight Championship in January 2025. Cemented his legacy as one of the most dominant champions in modern history. Still no Goldberg in sight. Until June 16. Until Gunther, in the middle of the ring, in front of a crowd still buzzing from his match with Jey Uso, decided to do more than ignore Goldberg. He decided to bury him. Goldberg's a ghost. A relic. Those weren't just throwaway lines. Those were lines meant to eliminate the need for the past. To plant a flag in the ground and declare the present untouchable. But what Gunther didn't realize was that by naming the ghost, he brought it to life. Goldberg didn't come back for a title. He came back for a reckoning. The Cold War had ended. The ice had cracked. And the fight was now official. July 12. Atlanta. No longer a hypothetical. The past and the present were finally going to collide. Not as tribute. Not as nostalgia. As war. The moment was quiet. Too quiet. Raw had just returned from commercial. No music. No graphics. Just a handheld camera shot from behind, tracking down a hallway deep in the bowels of the Resch Center. The kind of camera angle WWE reserves for moments it wants to feel real. Uneasy. Documentary style. Like you're spying on something you weren't supposed to see. Roman Reigns was already there. No commentary. No catchphrase. No bloodline behind him. Just the tribal chief in his gear, leaning against a cold cinderblock wall, arms crossed over his chest, head slightly down. Thinking. Waiting. You could hear the muffled crowd from the arena outside, still buzzing after Goldberg's surprise return. The roar hadn't faded. You could feel it vibrating through the floor of the hallway. Roman hadn't moved since the commercial break. He didn't need to. Then came the sound. Footsteps. Heavy. Steady. Echoing in the distance. Roman looked up. And there he was. Goldberg. No entrance theme. No pyro. No mic. Just a man with purpose, cutting through the shadows of backstage like he owned them. He wasn't sweating. He wasn't smiling. He didn't say a word as he approached. But his presence filled the hallway like a storm cloud. One man walking in was enough to change the pressure in the air. Roman's jaw tensed, but he didn't flinch. He stood straight, uncrossing his arms. Eyes locked forward. No blinking. Goldberg stopped just short of him. Maybe a foot away. Not close enough to crowd him. Just close enough to send a message. They didn't touch. Didn't shake hands. Didn't nod. They stared. A full 6 seconds passed. And then Roman spoke first. "Goldberg," he said. His voice calm. Measured. But the bass in it was unmistakable. Authority layered with tension. "Didn't expect to see you here." Goldberg's reply came without hesitation. "Didn't expect to be here." Pause. Breath. But some things need settling. There was no need to explain. The past between them didn't need narration. It was written all over their faces. Elimination Chamber 2022. Roman Reigns defeating Goldberg in a match that many believed should have happened years earlier, at WrestleMania 36. That match was cancelled when Roman pulled out due to the pandemic. Goldberg was left without a main event. Without closure. They finally fought, and Roman won decisively. But the build-up had died before it began. And Goldberg? He never forgot what could have been. What should have been. Roman smiled. It wasn't friendly. "You're not here for me," he said. It wasn't a question. Goldberg shrugged slightly. "Not this time, Chief. Beat. My sights are on Gunther. But don't think I forgot what happened in Jeddah." Jeddah. The city. The match. The moment Goldberg passed out in Roman's guillotine and faded into the mat. Clean loss. No excuses. No interference. Just Roman at his most dominant. But also, Roman at his most protected. Roman didn't respond right away. He tilted his head, just a bit. That trademark smirk trying to form, but not quite getting there. "You do what you gotta do," Roman said. His tone flat now. "I see. But remember, this is still my yard." Goldberg stepped forward. It wasn't aggressive. But it was deliberate. Now just a few inches away. "I'm not here to step on your toes, Reigns," he said. "I'm here to finish what I started with Gunther. Beat. But if you want another go, another pause." Goldberg's eyes narrowed. His jaw clenched. "You know where to find me." Roman didn't move. But you could see it in his eyes. Calculation. Memory. Fire held in check. For all the bravado, for all the years of dominance, Roman Reigns was standing across from the only man who ever truly threatened his aura by presence alone. Not by storylines. Not by bloodline betrayals. Just presence. They stood like that for a moment longer. Neither blinked. Then Goldberg turned. He didn't walk away quickly. Just pivoted and left. No theatrics. No parting shot. Just one message, left in the air like the echo of a punch that never landed. Reigns watched him go. Still unmoving. But the expression had shifted. There was no smile now. No smirk. Just a flicker of something else. Not fear. Not respect. Recognition. He knew what Goldberg was. What Goldberg represented. A disruptor. A weapon. A symbol of power that doesn't ask for permission. And Reigns, for the first time in months, had to acknowledge a world that didn't orbit him. As Goldberg turned the corner and vanished into the dark, the camera turned back to Reigns. The tribal chief didn't speak. He just watched. Then, out of the shadows behind the camera, a voice. Low. Quick. Nervous. Tribal chief, it said. Paul Heyman stepped into frame. Face flushed. Breathing shallow. Visibly shaken. Did he say something to you? Heyman asked, voice barely above a whisper. Roman looked at him. He didn't need to, he said. Heyman looked over his shoulder, not for security, not for help, but like someone who just felt the chill of something ancient walking by. Then, a line that sent shivers across every screen watching. Wise man, Roman said, barely audible. Start watching tapes. The screen faded to black. No music. No commercial sting. Just black. And in that silence? The echo of war. Paul Heyman is not a man who panics easily. He spent 3 decades managing chaos, often by orchestrating it. He's seen careers rise and fall, champions crowned and dethroned, legends made and unmade. When most people are sweating, Heyman is already 3 moves ahead, phone in one hand, contract in the other. But on June 16, 2025, Paul Heyman lost control of the board. It started in guerrilla. Backstage sources said Heyman was watching Gunther's post-match promo with the usual smug detachment. The Intercontinental title? Irrelevant. Gunther was now in the heavyweight class. A threat, yes, but one the bloodline didn't consider urgent. Then the chants started. Goldberg. Goldberg. Heyman didn't blink. Then Gunther said the name. That was when Heyman leaned forward. He didn't say a word, but those around him noticed the change. The fingers twitching. The brief, almost imperceptible widening of the eyes. Not fear, yet. But concern. Strategic concern. A possible problem forming just off-screen. Then the lights went out. Heyman stood up. He didn't speak. He just stood. When the music hit, that unmistakable pulse of destruction, Heyman's hand went into his jacket pocket. He pulled out his phone. Started dialing. He wasn't calling Reigns. Reigns was in the building. This was different. He left guerrilla. By the time Goldberg was halfway down the ramp, Heyman was gone. Not running. But walking with urgency. Eyes forward. Jaw clenched. The man who'd guided the bloodline through betrayals, injuries, and broken alliances wasn't in control anymore. Something ancient had entered the playing field. Something that didn't fit the plan. Because here's the truth about Heyman's strategy, it's built on leverage. On systems. He doesn't manage fighters, he manages outcomes. And Goldberg? Goldberg is chaos personified. He doesn't follow scripts. Doesn't ask permission. Doesn't need allies. He shows up, destroys whoever's in his way, and leaves a crater where a storyline used to be. That's what terrifies Heyman. Because the bloodline story is a structure. A legacy of control, mind games, carefully placed betrayals. Every move is planned 2 months ahead. Every feud is seeded long before fans realize what's happening. Goldberg doesn't play that game. He doesn't build arcs. He breaks them. So when Heyman got word that Goldberg was seen heading toward the backstage corridor where Roman was waiting, he panicked. This wasn't supposed to happen. There had been no sit-down. No creative meetings. No run sheet with Goldberg's name. He wasn't booked. He wasn't expected. And worst of all, he wasn't invited. Heyman's panic wasn't theatrical. It was functional. He went straight to the production office. Asked for real-time camera feeds. Demanded to know who cleared Goldberg. No one had an answer. The call came from someone higher. No one knew who. That's when it really sank in. Goldberg wasn't back for nostalgia. He was back for impact. And Paul Heyman, master manipulator, was completely out of the loop. By the time he reached the hallway, it was too late. The confrontation had already happened. Goldberg had already said what he needed to say. Already looked Roman in the eye and reminded him of the unfinished business that everyone, including Heyman, thought was buried. Heyman caught the end of it from around the corner. He watched Goldberg walk away. He saw Roman's face, that rare mix of quiet recognition and territorial threat. And Heyman knew. This wasn't just a complication. It was a storm. A storm that could unravel years of planning in one night. Back in the Bloodline's private dressing room, Heyman closed the door and sat down. Alone. The phone in his hand again. Not calling. Just holding it. There are moments when even the smartest men realize they're not in control anymore. That they've spent so long engineering dominance that they forgot what raw dominance even looks like. Goldberg reminded him. Heyman began pulling files. Footage. Past matches. The Lesnar trilogy. The Undertaker match. The Strowman squash. The 2016 return. The WCW archives. Not for nostalgia. For survival. Because if Goldberg beats Gunther in Atlanta, the entire power dynamic of WWE shifts. A 58-year-old man becomes champion in his hometown. The headlines write themselves. The legacy cements itself. The authority Goldberg carries becomes current, not historical. And if that happens? The one man who once made Roman Reigns feel untouchable, won't be anymore. Because the moment Goldberg has gold around his waist again, everything Heyman spent building, the myth of Roman Reigns as the last great alpha, crumbles. It's no longer about the undisputed championship. It's about aura. And Goldberg's aura, if reignited, could swallow Roman's. Heyman understands that better than anyone. He saw it with Lesnar. He saw it with Cena. He even saw it, briefly, with The Fiend. There are forces in WWE that aren't booked, they descend. Goldberg is one of them. And now he's not descending randomly. He's targeted. He's strategic. He's coming for the most dangerous, most protected, most respected champion of the modern era, not to steal a spotlight, but to burn the whole map. And the worst part? He doesn't need a faction. He doesn't need a mouthpiece. He doesn't even need a storyline. All he needs is one shot. Heyman knows it. And on June 16th, for the first time in years, the wise man didn't look wise. He looked worried.